All right. Hello, everyone. We'll just get started in a few minutes. So just feel free to let us know in the chat where you are joining us from. We'd love to hear all about it. Awesome. All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Community Builder session. My name is Hiba, and I'll be your host for today's panel. I would like to begin by gratefully acknowledging that Science World is located on the traditional and unceded land of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. Today, we will start with a quick introduction from our amazing group of mentors, followed by a hosted discussion. If you have questions for the mentors, please feel free to put those in the chat at any time. Our technician today is Josh, who will be monitoring the chat. If you have any technical issues, they would be happy to assist. We ask that you keep comments in the chat and the questions section respectful and relevant to the topics being discussed. Now it's time to meet our mentors. Let's start by going around and doing a brief introduction before we jump right into the questions. Mentors, if you could turn on your camera, we'll bring you right up on the screen. Awesome. All right. So we are looking forward to having a great discussion with all of you. So can we get maybe each of you to let us know your name, your job title, and where you work, and maybe the thing that you love the most about your career? Megan, let's start with you.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm so glad to be here today. So my name is Megan Pate. I am a manager at the City of Vancouver, and I am responsible for the Northeast False Creek project. And that project involves replacing the Georgia and Dunsmuir viaducts in downtown Vancouver and replacing them with a new transportation network. And so that also includes building new utilities and really supporting a brand new community that's going to be just to the north of Science World. So it's a really exciting transformational project for Vancouver. And I think the part that I love best about my job is being able to work every day on something that the public will interact with, and it will have a positive, hopefully positive influence on their day-to-day lives.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Sarah, I have you next on my screen.
Hey, everybody. My name is Sarah. I'm a project engineer for BC Hydro. I work in our generations project area, which means that when there are new powerhouses or dams or anything big and new being created at BC Hydro, somebody like me is one of the people who coordinates all of that and puts it all together. My favorite part of the job is probably, after all of the many years of planning and coordinating and meetings and getting things done, finally having the things that I participated in organizing exist in real life. And one of the things I'm looking forward into the future is seeing those things that I worked on continue to exist for 20, 30, 40 years.
That's exciting. Thank you so much. And finally, I have Frida.
Hi, I'm Frida Leon. I'm the manager of Indigenous Infrastructure for Associated Engineering. I work with Indigenous communities from as far south as the Soyuz, as far west as Lax Kw'alaams and Haida, as far north as the Northwest Territories and Nunavut, and as far east as I think right now Fort St. John, Baker Lake. So far flung regions of our province and the territories. But definitely what I do love doing is working with small communities and indigenous communities and making supporting them and being a strong ally.
That's awesome to hear. Thank you so much for sharing. It's very, very cool to hear about all of your different backgrounds. And I'm sure as we ask these questions, there will be commonalities that come up kind of throughout all of them, even though you're in such different realms of what you do. So for everyone that's listening at home, feel free to pop any burning questions that you have for any of our mentors in the chat, and we're happy to go through them. But what I would love to hear from all of you guys is, how did you get started in your career? What kinds of things did you do kind of when you were maybe some of these girls' ages, so around 14 to 16? And what kinds of things did you do, when you were younger? So we can go the opposite way. So Frida, why don't we start with you?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I think the big thing is, as much as I think a lot of people just think about engineering as being math and science, and that we're mathematicians or scientists. And I think that's a misconception. So I think I was always interested in math and science, but not necessarily being great at math, but really enjoying science. And I think to get into engineering, you do have to work on that piece, right? You have to work on the math and science. You have to keep up with that. But also, I think you can always get support. I think the biggest thing I wish I knew at that age was that I thought if I sucked at math, I wouldn't be able to do this. And but people told me, you can work on the math and you can get help. And so I did work on that. I did work on that piece of myself. But I also was fortunate that my dad was a developer, so I got to spend time on site. And if you know anybody where you get the opportunity to work on site, that's something I think at this age would be great for you, just to have a better understanding of what's out there.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I love that you added a bit of a piece of advice there for everyone listening at home. That's awesome. Sarah, we'd also love to hear how you got started in your career and where you're at.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I came at it from a little bit of a different angle, because I did really like the math and science stuff when I was that age. And I have a dad who's a scientist, and I kind of expected that I was just going to become a scientist because I didn't know what an engineer was. I was really lucky when I was in grade 11 to participate in a program called Wisest, and I got to spend 6 weeks working on a university campus with other people in the engineering field doing like a little bit of research study. So that was really my first exposure to the fact that engineer existed as kind of a job in a variety of fields, and not this really abstract pencil pusher kind of made up cartoony idea that I had. So that was really awesome. And everybody who's watching this right now is way ahead of me, because you have all sorts of examples of different engineers and kind of professions that you're getting exposed to right now. One of the things that I did, I guess, a little bit more when I was in high school was I still didn't know what I wanted to do exactly. So I was careful to keep my options open. So for me, what that really meant was I wasn't that interested in biology necessarily, but I took biology in high school just because I wanted to know, like, maybe it was something that I really loved, and maybe there was some course I'd want to take later where I needed that kind of background. So keeping your options open, and maybe kind of considering that you might want to change paths at some point, or you might change your mind, or something really cool might come up, and leaving yourself open for that opportunity.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Oh my gosh, you all are giving like such good tidbits of advice in there, and I didn't even ask my advice questions. So that's awesome there. Um, Megan, what made you decide to kind of go into the job that you're working at with the city and the project that you're doing right now? And yeah, how did you get into kind of where you are with the city, and why do you stay there?
Oh, good question. Well, I guess to be fully honest, I didn't know what I was going to do. So kind of building a bit off of what the other two mentors here said, keeping my options in high school open were great. I focused on doing things that were prereqs for university. And so that was, yeah, kind of the main driver, at least in grade 12. So I took chemistry and physics because those seemed to be kind of the most common prereqs. But yeah, I really didn't know what I was going to do. And that theme carried itself a little bit through university. I kind of got into first year engineering thinking it was a good degree that could have led to medicine or could have led to engineering or a whole bunch of different possible careers. But anyway, I ended up picking civil engineering because I thought that, you know, city building was an interesting kind of concept, and the idea of being able to live in a city. And I lived in a city growing up. And so the idea of being able to contribute to where I lived was quite appealing. And then I left university and thought I was going to do some consulting engineering. And so that would allow me to kind of work all over the place, similar to Frida. And then I ended up actually not pursuing that. I ended up getting a job at the city because someone had said, you should look at the city. They do really cool event planning of all things. And so I spent summer doing kind of public plazas, which seemed so far away from the technical engineering work that I had learned in school. But it was a really fun summer. And then I went traveling because I still wasn't sure what I wanted to do, and eventually came back to the city just because I had great contacts there and they were offering me a job in the water department. And I've been at the city for 9 years now, so I haven't stayed in the water department. I've had a really wonderful bunch of opportunities to try out a whole bunch of different jobs. So this theme of not knowing what you're doing entirely, I think has really in some ways worked for me, right? I've been open to opportunities as they have come. And I think the changing challenges has really kept me in this job. The idea that I can go and do a bunch of different projects and different things and work with different community groups in different neighborhoods has been really motivating for me. So I think that kind of answers the question, but I would say thinking back on all of it, you know, it's okay not to know. And I think sometimes me not knowing exactly what I'm doing next has allowed me to take different opportunities that have come my way. And I'm very grateful that I've had lots of wonderful opportunities presented to me. So yeah, so hopefully that helps. It's okay not to know, especially when you're in high school. It's okay not to know. And yeah, keep your options open, as Sarah said, because yeah, there's just so many opportunities you have no idea are coming your way.
That's awesome. Thank you. Again, wow, those questions right off the bat, those three answers, such great tidbits of advice there, which I absolutely love. For those watching at home, I know some people have been flitting in and out. Feel free, if you have any burning questions, just type it in the chat and it'll show up as comments, and we're happy to ask it to any of the mentors here. Sarah, I'm curious to know, what does a typical day at your job look like? Or do you have typical days? Actually, maybe might be a more apt question.
Yeah, hard to say, really. So I think it's kind of typical that something weird is going to happen in a given day. But what I have kind of in my weekly schedule is I have a few meetings with the companies who are doing the project work for the engineering design that I coordinated, meetings with kind of our technical people. And then most of what I spend my time doing, honestly, is finding answers to weird things that come up. Somebody asks a question that we didn't think of when we were coordinating all of our design, some reason that there's a small change that somebody wants to make, and kind of figuring out if that works. So it's a mix of planned work, kind of going through and doing everything the way that you put it together really nicely. And then some days, maybe even the whole day is going to be derailed by something unexpected that comes up, and really reacting quickly and being creative about finding solutions to problems.
Sounds good. Thank you. Frida, I'm actually curious to know, what skills do you think help you most in your job or your career right now?
Communication. I
Mhm.
think one of the big things that people underestimate in engineering is that they think that we just sit in our little dark rooms with our, our pencils, our pocket protractors, and our calculators. But a big part of what we do is communication. And I think it's really surprising in this day and age how much soft engineering is actually more important than the hard engineering. Community meetings are a big part of what we do. Lots of meetings in general. Keeping, like I said, especially with Indigenous communities, we're there to offer support and to be there, an extension of their capacity. Because we work with a lot of communities where they are short staffed, where they are a bit overwhelmed. And so we're sort of subbing in to make sure that we can help carry a project through, not because they're not capable of doing it, but more to do with they just don't have the capacity at that point in time to take on this project and carry it through to construction. So I find, like, biggest thing, communication,
Interesting.
writing lots of reports, having lots of meetings. Like during this time, the last 2 years, I don't know if I've ever had as much meetings as now. This is the bulk of our lives, meetings.
Very fair. I'm sure both Megan and Sarah can echo your sentiments there about meetings. I'm wondering for our audience, if you could elaborate what soft engineering and hard engineering is. I think that would be a really valuable thing for them to know.
So soft engineering is the people skills. So it's not the stuff that you're really learning in school in terms of, it's not hard design. It's not looking to say, okay, I need to get a pipe from A to B. And the pipe from A to B requires that I have this sort of a pipe. It needs to have this pressure class. It has to have these joints. It has to have thrust blocks. Those are all the hard engineering things, right? That is the thing to put that pipe in the ground. The soft engineering is looking at, okay, what are the environmental impacts? What are the, okay, I'm going to be going through this area of the community. How does this impact the community members? What does the construction end up doing to them, right? And so, and the soft engineering is also looking at, okay, why am I putting this pipe in, right? How does it benefit the community? So there's a whole bunch of things that go to making this project important, but it's not necessarily all that hard engineering that you learned in school.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And then finally, Megan, what is something about your job or kind of your industry in general that surprised you or continues to surprise you?
Yeah, and I think I can kind of build on the last answer. The focus on communication and working with people and brokering deals, for lack of a better word, but like negotiating and trying to understand what people need and how you actually achieve that is very, very important, at least in my job. Yeah, I do very little math. I do a lot of adding and subtracting to manage budgets and putting together cost estimates, but I have not done a lot of big math equations to figure out how water flows in a pipe in quite some time. And I definitely thought that was more what it was going to be. It was going to be very specific problems that you would solve, and then you'd support the construction of it. But I think, yeah, the idea that you're asking people what they need, taking feedback, prioritizing what people are wanting, has been so much more prevalent in my career than I ever anticipated. And thankfully, that's the most satisfying part of my job. So it's nice that the surprising part is also the most rewarding.
Awesome. Thank you. I think one thing that I've heard in different nuances from everybody here are a few misconceptions. I think, Frida, you pointed out that you had math and science and that you weren't really good at math. So I think that's maybe one of the biggest misconceptions I feel like I have too, that engineering is just math. But I think Megan and Sarah and Frida, you've done such a great job of pointing out that there's so much more to that than those hard engineering skills. So building off on that, I think I mentioned maybe one big one, but I'd love to hear from all of you. for this one. What are common misconceptions that people have about your jobs or the industry that you work in? And how do you think we can combat these misconceptions and communicate more effectively? So we heard, I think, Frida, one from you. We've heard actually from everybody, I think, but if anyone had any more specific ones, Sarah, can start with you, or if anybody wants to jump in on this one, feel free.
Okay, I guess I have one. So sometimes you might be out and you might look at something that looks a little bit weird. Like there might be a piece of electrical equipment on a sidewalk, and then the sidewalk goes like this. And I think a lot of people, when they see things like that, they go like, some engineer just put it there without thinking. And honestly, sometimes that is true. I will give you that. But a lot of the time when something like that happens, it is like the 18th thing that should have been noticed. And there are just so many steps and so much care that go into putting a design together normally, looking at kind of the way that people are going to react around it, making sure it's like sustainable and it makes sense for where it's going. I think there is a lot of opportunity to add care and kind of do a really good job in engineering. It's not just like, I don't think I know any engineer who's happy to finish the math equation and pass it on to somebody else and say like, this is your problem now. We have a lot of opportunity to kind of do a good job with some of those not number-based things.
Yeah, and I think that's a very good point, is that it's really this kind of whole life cycle, right? That you do get to influence so much more than you think, right? And a lot of people, when they think engineering, think, oh, they're going to be someone who designs cars or airplanes or mechanical systems. And it can be something as specific as a curb let down. So when you're walking on the sidewalk and you're going into an intersection, like those curb let downs are discussed at length to make sure that people with strollers can navigate them, or someone in a wheelchair can navigate them, and that they get put into the intersection in the crosswalk. Like there is a lot of detail that goes into a lot of little simple things that maybe people take for granted. So I think that's certainly, such a beautiful part of engineering, that, we get to, like, if we do our job right, things are really simple and straightforward for people in some ways. So I think that's a great point that Sarah made. And then the other piece I think that maybe is a misconception that I've heard from people is that engineers work a lot in isolation. And maybe that's been true during the pandemic. Some of us are certainly still working from home, and it might seem like isolation, but it's not. Engineers working individually. Like we're not all just working on a project by ourselves and making it happen. It's a very team-based career. And I think that's been something that I've really enjoyed, is being able to work closely with others and get to know people and really having this team environment every day. So you're not going to be in a dark room by yourself doing math. You're going to have lots of opportunities to make good friends and work on things together. And maybe that's another misconception I've heard before.
Yeah, it is a lot more team-based than people realize. There's a lot of collaboration, and like it's collaborating with your internal team, it's collaborating with your external team. I think, like I said, there's just a huge misunderstanding that we don't communicate, that we don't have jobs that require a lot of communication and engagement and working in teams, but we're always in huge teams. The bigger the project, the more you have in your team. And so it's a much more social job than you realize. It's not isolating at all.
Yeah. And the one thing I would say is that if you are more introverted, there are different roles in different teams that could also suit you. So if you're not a big communicator and you don't like presenting and talking to big groups of people, there are, of course, engineering opportunities within these different teams that your skill set will be really well suited to as well, right? So I don't want to scare people off if you're not a big fan of talking to people you don't know, because that was me when I started out. I've kind of learned a lot of these skills to talk to bigger groups of people. But I think there's just so many different opportunities within these teams to find your place.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It's a lovely sentiment, I think, that engineering is so open to kind of different personalities and different, I think every job and every opportunity looks so different. I would love to hear if you have any kind of challenges that you faced in your industry or kind of when you started working at your jobs or even kind of during your schooling, any challenges that anyone faced. Yeah. I'll leave it open. I'd love to hear from anybody.
I think with civil engineering, we've always, and electrical actually, civil and electrical here, we haven't been the biggest group of females at university. Usually if you're like in electrical or in civil, you're maybe some years there'll be like 10% are females. We might swing up to 15%, like if it's a bumper crop. But then we'll drop back to 5% the following year or something. So there's not, it's different in terms of there's not, sometimes it's sort of like you gravitate to like, right? So you gravitate to what you see as faces that are similar. And so it's sometimes a bit challenging because you go into this and it is a lot more guys. But I think what was really awesome though, is that all the girls knew each other. And it seemed up like it ended up being your posse, right? And so in a way it worked out in your favor because there's not a lot of you guys, but you all knew each other. But at the same time, it can be sometimes challenging when you first get into it that you think, well, I don't see a lot of like, right? But you have to realize that it's not going to change how you experience university, right? And it's not going to change when you get into the workforce too. And I've realized definitely in the last 10 years, there's a lot more females in the workforce. And that's because you're not just working with civil engineers or electrical engineers. There's a lot more in chemical, females in process, and also environmental engineering. So once you get to your workplace, there's a lot more as a general rule.
Awesome. Thank you. Anyone else have anything else to comment? Maybe while our mentors are thinking about that one. Just for everybody listening at home, yeah, we are kind of coming up in the last few minutes of our chat here. So if you did have any super burning questions to ask our mentors, all you have to do is just pop it in the comment section. And then we ask that you keep any questions that you have for us or comments in the chat respectful and relevant to the topics that are being discussed right now. Yeah, Megan and Sarah, anything else to add? If you don't, that's okay. I have a plethora of questions I'm so curious to hear.
I have one, maybe. So one of the things that was mentioned earlier that's really good is to get site experience. As a part of BC Hydro, they have a really awesome EIT program that lets you do like a couple different rotations in different jobs. And one of the things they encourage you to do is do one at site, so either like at a generating facility or on a construction project, and that was a little bit challenging for me. Excuse me. Just because I don't look necessarily like the sort of person who's going to be like a site engineer. My hair is pink. I drive a car. I live in a city. I do a lot of city things. And a lot of the time I was going to like a more rural environment where people weren't really sure kind of how to treat me. So that is something that I struggled with a lot at the beginning because it was a little bit of like me being shy and not wanting to do the wrong thing, but other people being shy and not wanting to do the wrong thing. And eventually it just wasn't an issue at all. But it did take me taking a few leaps of faith and other people taking a few leaps of faith to be like, I don't look necessarily like the sort of person you expect in this job, but like I'm here to learn. I'm here to have fun. We can talk about the same TV shows that we watch and we can, complain about how our lunches aren't as delicious as we wish that they were. So yeah, trying to just find commonalities I found a little bit challenging at the beginning, but eventually I realized it was we're all in the same position there. So if you do have the extra energy to be a little bit more outgoing, I found that ultimately that's what got me over that hump.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right. Maybe let's do like a rapid round of one more rapid round question and then one question to end off. Megan, I would love to hear if there were people kind of that inspired you or helped you along the way in your journey in your career.
Yeah, so many people have certainly been huge in helping me along. All of the people that trained me and that I've worked with have taught me everything I know and helped me gain the confidence to do my job. And so I'm very grateful for them. I could list them, but there's like a 25-person long list. And so I think what I would say is kind of my piece of advice on that is, make lots of friends, make friends with people that have more experience than you, make friends with your peers, because you will still go for walks 10 years later with your university engineering friends and talk about your jobs and how you can help each other out. And so it's really important to, make those connections and put the effort in to stay in touch with people and thank your mentors when you have the opportunity. Because having contacts and being able to rely on others and have people rely on you is very important in this job, or at least in my job.
Awesome. Thank you. Frida, I'm curious to know, what is something you're excited to see happen in your industry in the next 5 or maybe 10 years down the line?
I definitely love the amount of Indigenous engagement I'm seeing now, that people are actually having really open and honest engagement versus the old days of engagement where we come up with ideas and then we tell you what to do, but we tell you, wasn't it a great idea for you? I'm seeing a lot more people actually spend the time to not just tell people what they're going to be doing, but to explain it and to get input. And that to me is such a positive, because we're really building on TRC, the Truth and Reconciliation. And I see so much of that happening. And I see more Indigenous students getting into engineering. And that to me is fantastic. And I think I go back to that, people gravitate to like. And so hopefully with more Indigenous students getting into engineering or into engineering technology, we're going to see a wave of Indigenous engineers or engineering technologists.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And finally, Sarah, would love to hear, what are some of the ways that people from your industry are making a difference in the world?
Yeah, well, that feels like a very softball question, honestly, because I work for BC Hydro and what we do is electrification. So especially as we move away from fossil fuels and toward more renewable energy sources, we have a ton of hydro generation, but we also invest and create economic opportunities for wind and solar. So yeah, people in my industry are looking for ways to keep the energy needs of the province going on, with kind of finding new innovative ways to be more friendly to the environment as we do so.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Let's wrap up with kind of one last question, one last overall question. So what advice would you give to a 14-year-old who is interested in your line of work? And I think there is so much advice being given throughout the session here. Megan, if you wanted to start as well, and maybe for those who are also, I think you also brought up about kind of meeting friends and trying to make those connections. So I'd also love to hear kind of your perspective, maybe of if people are kind of struggling with that too, because I think that was a great tidbit of advice that you gave. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think making friends and new connections is a lifelong kind of challenge and opportunity, right? Everybody is going to change and make new friends and meet new people. And when I say friends, it doesn't have to be your best friend that you spend all your time with, but it's people that you like working with. And so, one of the ways that I made friends, especially in university, was that I was paired with people through my classes. So in civil engineering, there was lots of different projects that we were assigned to work on together, and they gave us groups to be in. So one of the people that I'm really close with now, he was in one of my project groups in university, and we worked together on the project. And then we had that in common. And so we could talk about that project. And then over time, we've talked about our different projects. And so, I think one of the ways that I have been able to make connections and new friends in my career is by asking people questions. So asking people what they like about their job, what they're working on. And this can even be in your high school classes, right? Sitting down beside somebody in one of your physics classes that you don't know very well and asking them, why are you taking physics? Why is this interesting to you? So yeah, lots of questions, and being open to answering questions when people ask you questions, I think goes a long way in making those connections. But it's not always easy, and I acknowledge that. But yeah, I think it's something we can all work on, and we can all be better friends to one another. And then advice just generally. So I think that was actually a pretty good answer to that question, the final follow-up question. But just be interested in different things that are happening in your community. So the city of Vancouver, for example, and other communities in the Lower Mainland and all over the province of BC, in fact, do a lot of different outreach programs and engagement. And so you can actually go on your hometown's website and learn about the different projects that are being done, and you can get involved, whether it's cleaning up streets or, just giving your opinion about things. And we love having people of all different ages and backgrounds give us their feedback and their advice. So I encourage you to, go on your city's website and see what's coming up and what's new. And you'll have a better idea of all the different projects that engineers are working on in your hometown.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Megan. Sarah, up next for you. Do you have any advice for any of our listeners that are watching today?
Yeah, I think that the internet is a wonderful tool. And the piece of advice that I might give people is, yes, math is a part of engineering, but there's actually a lot that goes on and technical concepts that you can just understand by watching videos or looking at cool things. So if there's a subject that interests you, like, we'll pretend you're interested in space, even though that's not what we're talking about. The math is really hard. The science is really hard, but there are a lot of people right now who are putting out really great educational content that will give you a really good overview of kind of the vocabulary of what's going on, let you know what the latest news is. You're at a really great point now where you can just learn about basically anything that you're interested in, and somebody has probably put together something really nice and easy to digest to get you started learning about more.
Awesome. Thank you. And then finally, Frida, wrapping us up here with a tidbit of advice.
Don't give up. As much as that whole thing is, you hit some roadblocks, but don't give up. I think the thing is perseverance. It's never going to be the first step that you take that you get it right, but realize that you can always correct and come back around, and you can redeem yourself. Because I did a year of Bachelor of Science because I didn't know what I wanted to do, right? And Megan, I think everybody has sort of looked at, gone down a little path and realized, hey, maybe this is a stumbling block for me and this isn't the path I want to pursue. But you can always come back and have a look at different options. So the biggest thing is, don't give up, believe in yourself and continue, persist. And if you're having problems connecting with people, keep trying, because everybody, when you get into university, it's a big place. There's so many people and it can be overwhelming. But you know what? Most people are in the same position that you are.
Such a lovely tidbit of advice to end us off with. Thank you so much. And thank you all of our mentors, Megan, Sarah, and Frida. I really enjoyed chatting with you. I think I learned a lot too. I'm not in the engineering field at all, but I very much so enjoyed learning from you. So it does look like we are at time here, and we want to thank everyone at home for joining us today. Yes, again, thank you so much to our mentors for sharing your time and your experiences. So for everyone at home, we will now be having a bit of a bio break and a bit of extra time to explore our interactive virtual booths. So you can access the booths through the Exhibit Hall button at the top of the page in Project Board. The next session will start at 6 p.m. And that's Pacific Standard Time. So be sure to pick out where you want to go next. Thanks again, everyone. and hopefully we'll see you at 6 p.m. Bye, everybody.
Bye.